Hey guys, welcome back. So, in the last lecture, we were able to push, or not push, actually that's not the right term. We were able to actually persist a project task in our database, all right? So this is working great, and I'm just gonna prove you. Let's just do a little test, right? Just test this out together. So I did a little dry run before I started recording, because it's been a few days since I recorded the last lecture. So basically I did a test one, but I'm just gonna want to do that live with you guys here. And remember, don't worry about this because we haven't yet done anything for us to show the tasks that we have in our database yet. So don't worry about these dummy ones, all right? So then we're gonna go and create a project task and say task created with my awesome students. And if I do this, everything seems to be working as expected. All right. So as I mentioned in the last lecture, now we're going to work on actually doing some error validation with this. All right. So there are two things that we want to do. We want to first understand what is that we want to happen when everything goes well, which we kind of already did. But then we also want to understand what needs to happen when we have an error. Now, what's an error? What's going to be an error? So if you remember, guys, and by the way, and I should have just opened with that, my server is running, okay? My server is running at this very moment. But if you remember correctly, based on the validation that we set up on the post mapping, right? If we don't pass all the required data, which in this case is a summary, then the server is going to come back with a 400 BAT request and a JSON object. All right. So now what we want to do is actually help or set up a React application so that it can then handle and dispatch. And this is a keyword here: dispatch that error onto our application state. And this is what we're going to use Redux for. All right, so I'm going to start by doing an import here, which is get errors from types. Okay, because, and this is going to be the flow, and I'm going to steer away from the textbook explanation, and I'm just going to give you like the simplest possible terms. The way I want this to work is that if there is an error, it goes from here to our reducer. The reducer is going to return our actions payload. Obviously, this is going to meet up at the root reducer, which will in turn update our store. And then what's going to happen is that error object that we get from our server is going to get loaded right here in this array right here, in this object right here, right? So that's the flow, and I know that it takes a little while to get the hang of this. It's not because it's difficult, it's just because, you know, it's a flow that you need to get used to, like everything else, guys. It's like everything else, right? So let's start. Let's get coding, right? I'm pretty sure you guys are here because you want to see this thing working. All right, so now that we have our import of the action type, then what we're gonna do is surround this little pretty piece of code. We're gonna surround it in a try catch block. Okay, and then we're just gonna cut this out of here, and then of course what we're gonna do is try and persist. Right, that's the first thing that we're gonna do. We're gonna try and persist this to our backend. Now, one thing that and you guys will see it if some of you join my course. You guys will see what I'm talking about there. But one thing that you always want to do is make sure that if everything goes well, you use the dispatch function to get errors. You use the dispatch function to actually clear out the payload. And again, I'm not going to go too deep into this. Just trust me on this. Because if you try and fill out the form, and the form has an error, then if you go out of the form and you try again, then what's going to happen is that those errors might stay in the state and come out when you don't need them. All right. So this is why it's always important to clear out the errors object if everything goes well. Now I'm just gonna do something real quick here, and I think I'm gonna comment that out because you know what, I really want to show you, because I don't want to give you information that's out of context for you. All right. But moving on, then here what we want to do is the following. If everything goes well, which we already tested, everything goes to the database, and that's great. But if everything goes badly because we're passing it bad data, then what we want to do is we want to get the error response data, which is nothing more than that JSON object that we get from our backend. So that we want to dispatch onto this action to our errors reducer. All right, and that's what we want to do, and that's what's going to fill out our errors state object, if you will. Now we have to clean something up. We have to clean this up here. We don't need this anymore. Okay, so again, error reducer, we're just cleaning up that test that we had there because we don't need that. The initial state of our application should be no errors, right? Because we haven't done anything. Okay, cool. So now with this in place, before we even do anything on the UI, what I want to see is that we actually see the errors in the state, and I'll show you what I mean. Just a moment, I just need to open the application. Okay. Sometimes I close it down like instinctive, like automatically, and it, you know. All right, so we're gonna go to inspect, and remember to have your extensions installed. We talked about that early in the game. So when we come here to the project task, to the form, if we try and pass this empty, our API is going to say, no, you need to pass this on. And then the error message that our API is going to give us, and again, we already tested this, but I'm just being very thorough here. It's going to tell you summary cannot be blank, right? That's the error message that we're getting from our server. So if I submit this, nothing's going to happen in the front end, but we should get, obviously we're going to get an error message. And let me just do it. There you go. Right? We get a 400 because again, nothing is really happening here. All right. So if I go to Redux state and you see the state here, you see that error that we're getting from our API is right here. Summary cannot be blank. All right. Now, this is what's going to happen if we don't put this here, and pay close attention. And actually, I'm gonna keep this here like commented out until we do the front end, just to bring this point home. But if I go out of here, that error is still there. Okay. If I go back here, that error is still there, right? So why not clear out our state if everything went well, right? Because even if I type something that went well, the error is still there, right? But if I uncomment this, save it, the error goes away, then we generate the error is here. Then when everything goes well, the error goes away again. And I'm pretty sure you guys saw that. So when we go back to the form, that error is not there anymore, right? It's not in our state anymore. All right, but I'm just gonna comment it out because I want us to see this thing in play when we do our front end. All right, cool. Okay, so now with this in place, we already have our errors loading in our state. So the next thing that we're going to do is go to our component, project task, add project task. And I'm just gonna close out of all of this because we don't need any of this. Now in add project task, the changes that we need to perform are as follows. First, we need to use a lifecycle hook. All right, and the lifecycle hook that we're gonna use here is component will receive props. All right, and we're just gonna put it right under the constructor. For no particular reason, I just like keeping things in a certain order. So we're gonna say component will receive props, and if you're using super awesome VS Code, and if you install all those super awesome extensions that I talked to you about, then it's gonna give you a little legend of what component will receive props is, and we can just read it. called when the component may be receiving new props. React may call this even if props have not changed. All right, so just to put this in context, when we load the add project component here, right, we receive all the props, right? We receive whatever props we're passing, and we're not passing any props ourselves, but we get the props from React Router DOM, which we already discussed, right? The history, the match, etc. But we do not, obviously we get the initial state of the errors, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we trigger an event, like submitting the form, if there are errors here, then the component has new props that needs to receive. In this case, it's the error messages right here. This error message right here. So right now, that's why it doesn't display anywhere, because this component needs to receive those props, right? Component will receive props. Okay? So it needs to receive it so that we can do something with it. All right? And I promise that's going to make even more sense in a few seconds. So now, as I mentioned, we're going to do that lifecycle hook. Component will receive props. Okay? The parameter that we get here is next props. Why? Because again, it's something that's coming out of an event, right? In this case, an event in which we are submitting the form with wrong data. Okay? Cool. So now we're going to put this, and what we're going to do is the following. Here in the constructor, and let me make more room, because I bet some of you are frustrated trying to see such a small window. My apologies, guys, okay? It is never my intention, okay? I just forget because I like coding that way. Here in the constructor, we're going to set up an errors object. I'm going to set up an errors object, and we're going to set it blank. So basically what we're saying is that the errors object in the component, its initial state is blank, just like everything else. All right, and I'm pretty sure that makes sense. All right, then what we're gonna do here in component will receive props is that we're gonna say if next props dot errors. All right, if next props dot errors, meaning that when we mapped our state to props, we are obviously mapping this to errors right here. So what we're saying is that if there are errors in the state, right, which is the next props that we're receiving of here, if that's so, then what we want to do is this dot set state. We want to set the new state, and we want to update the state of our errors object in the component. And we're going to set it up with whatever we're getting, whatever new information we're getting. All right? So that's the first step, to display the errors. Then now that we are actually loading this into the component's state, if you will, now we can just extract it from our state, from our updated state. So we're gonna go to the render method, and what we're gonna say is const errors equals this dot state using the structure in here. Remember, this is ES6 basics, so this shouldn't be this shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. So now that we're getting the errors out of the state, now that we are set up so that we can get whatever changes might come in the state, and now that we are actually extracting those errors from the component's current state, then we can come to summary, which is the input field that will have such errors. And what we can do is just be we're gonna put a p tag for now, and then I'm just gonna say errors dot summary. Why errors dot summary? What are you talking about, man? It's very simple. When we submit bad data, it's errors dot summary, and then we get the message right here. Does that make sense? I hope it does. All right. So now with that in place, we're gonna save this, and what's gonna happen is that that little message that we get in our state is also going to be in the component. And let's see if that works. And there you go. Summary cannot be blank. Now, and I just want to backtrack real quick to our project actions. Remember, this is commented out, right? So right now what we're saying is that even if things go well, whatever is in the error state, it's gonna stay there, right? So even if we submit a good project that contains a summary, and you know it's persistent in database, when we come back here, that state is still gonna be there. It's not gonna display here, obviously, but it's gonna still be here, and that's not good. All right, so we're gonna take care of that. All we need to do is to take care of that. All we need to do is uncomment this. All right, but before we do that, I do want to pretty up this error message because I mean this p tag that just looks plain ugly. I'm pretty sure you guys agree that that doesn't look good, and I know that you guys want to see what I demoed to you in the first lecture. So for this, we're gonna use class names, and that's a little library that amongst whatever else that it could do, one of the main things that it does is that it allows us to set up, say, like a conditional, right, for us to say include additional class names based on a, again, condition. So for this, all we need to do is come here to class name in the input field summary, which is the one that has an error, that could have errors. I'm gonna delete this. We don't need this right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab the form here that we have on the, the class, the bootstrap class that we have here in the class name, and I'm going to surround it by parentheses, and I'm just gonna come here again, and then I'm just gonna surround it by curly braces. Right, and then we're gonna use the class names that we imported in the previous video, which is this right here. Okay, I hope that's making sense. Then the syntax here is a little different, but it's not that hard anyway. So basically, what you do here is that you put the class name here, and then you put a comma here, and then you put another set of curly braces. So right now at the bottom here, you should have curly brace, parentheses, curly brace, right? And then what we're gonna say is that is invalid, and what this is saying is like add the class is invalid if errors that summary. All right, so basically what we're saying is that if there's summary in the errors object, then add the class is invalid to this bootstrap element right here, which is that input field. That's all we're saying right now. All right, so we're gonna save this, and now if I submit that data, see, it adds the is invalid class, which again, this is bootstrap, nothing else. It's just highlighting, hey, this is invalid, man. And now that we have this in place, the next thing that we want to do is just set up the message. Right, the message that we're getting from the server. So for this is our input field right here. I'm gonna go right under our input field, and all I'm gonna do is again use some say class name syntax, and I'm gonna say errors. That's summary. And again, this syntax is a little wonky, but nothing too earth shattering. So basically, what I'm saying here is that, you know, if there's a summary attribute in the errors object, then I want to see that message, which is errors. That's summary. All right. So with that in place now, I'm just gonna. Did I close it again? My God, guys, sorry. All right. So if with that in place, we can go to the form, and now we're gonna see this. Okay, now I wanna take us back to this, because if I submit one that's good and then come back here, as I mentioned before, it's still here, right? Like we still have errors right here, and I don't think that's good. So what we're gonna do is just uncomment this and just say we're just saying, hey, if everything goes well, then we can just clear out our errors, because I mean we don't have any use for whatever previous errors we might have had. All right, and now with that in place, everything works great. If I pass it bad data, it's telling you summary cannot be blank. Then if you pass it good data and you go to the database, you can connect here, then run the query here, and then as you can see, everything's working great. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you.